Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Squidge the podcast. I am super excited to kick off the new year with this interview with my friend Karly, who I had the pleasure of meeting down in Arizona last year. When you're listening to this, it's this year while we're recording this, and it's actually a funny story. We've already recorded this podcast a few weeks ago. We did an entire podcast, but the entire time Karly was outside I think is it a condo complex? Yeah, and there was just like constant distractions. So she would move and then there'd be something new, there'd be different noises. I couldn't hear anything on my end because Zoom does a really good job of blocking out background noises, but we figured it would be a good topic to talk about. And for those of you that don't know, Karly is the psychic coach. So we are going to be talking about the squidginess of intuition and how we can reconnect with that, which I think moving forward into 2025 is going to be necessary in order to survive whatever the hell's coming next. So kick it off for us. One of my favorite questions to ask people always is, before we get into the heavy stuff, is what do I need to know about who you were as a kid to know who you are now?
Love that question so much. Okay, so who was I as a kid? I was a creative as a kid. I was fascinated by dancing, singing. I grew up in Scotland, so I was very much connected to nature, the earth, just, history and roots, and, being a part of a culture that really embraced community and dance and singing and kind of self-expression, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's really contributed to who I am now, because growing up in a culture that honestly was very accepting of all people, of all ideas, uh, has really gave me this blank canvas for me to be able to explore what creativity means, what intuition means. And a big part of what I think about when I reflect back on who I was as a child was ballet, dance. My auntie, she was a professional ballet dancer. And it's funny because over Christmas, my family were sending photos to me. And one of the photos my mother sent was me in a ballerina dress. And I was like, wow, those images are so significant, because the way in which we can express ourselves can be through these things that we've maybe neglected, that we loved as a child, And I think that most of us have, in fact, all of us have these intuitive gifts that we are born with. And we are drawn to certain careers or ideas as children, but then it kind of gets suppressed as we grow up because other things influence that. But that's especially why I love that question, Terry, because when you think back to the things that interested you or drew your um, creative juices out as a child, is things that we end up going back to later in life when we embrace our authenticity.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I love that question, because knowing who people are as kids lets me know more about, even not necessarily what everybody else knows about you, depending on where people are in their journey to like getting back to that person. So it's always fun for me. I also like to say I like to have conversations with people where my 12-year-old self can enter the chat. And so it's like both of our younger selves are here and like have the space to explore the things that and the stories that were taught to us about the things they said, oh no, you can't do that because XYZ, you shouldn't do that because XYZ. And now as adults, we get to come back and say, like, no, no, little Terry, that was somebody else's story. Like, you don't have to believe that. We can move forward and explore those things again, even if it doesn't make logical sense. Um, so thank you so much for sharing that aspect. So before we started recording, we were talking about how the last time we recorded this podcast, there was all these distractions, and you were like, I think it's a very timely message that going into 2025, the state of the world is chaotic, maybe would be the word. So yeah, give me your insight into that.
Funny, that day I was trying my hardest to block out the distractions. And it was almost like the more aware I became of the distractions, the louder they got. And you couldn't hear it. And once we were done, I said, you know, you have no idea what's going on in my reality right now. It's just wild. And then you think of that as a concept. How many people do that? They have got so much going on behind the scenes, so many things to juggle, but on the surface, they look cool, calm, and collected because you believe that you have to show up in that way. And I think that as we move into next year, there is a real requirement for us to be really, really honest with the things that's going on in our lives, who we truly are, the things that we really want, and making choices that actually guide us on our highest path, as opposed to being distracted by everything that's going on, filling our lives with filling everyone else's cup. It has to come back to the point where we realize where we're distracted, how we are actually participating in it, taking responsibility for our own lives, and then simplifying the process so that we can fill our own cups so that we can then be of service to everybody else. And I think that's what we're seeing now is the balance has been off and the balance is then being restored. So yeah, we've been experiencing a lot of chaos and turbulence this year, but that is so necessary to clear the road for us to actually then be in alignment. So it's big, and if you have been experiencing chaos, then you're right on track. It's all good.
That's what I always my favorite thing to say, like when things are well, all the time, but I'm like, everything works out for me. So that way when it is like something that you normally you'd be like, this is the worst, like I'm like, nope, everything works out for me. This is meant to do something for me. Is like helpful to get me through the thing. But then in hindsight, it usually was something that brought something to the surface that I had been avoiding for a long time. And I'm seeing that so much with a lot of my friends, actually, and like acquaintances on Facebook or Instagram. Like so many relationships have gone tits up this like in 2024. And it's like out of the blue for so many of them. Like, or was it out of the blue? You know?
Yeah, that's it. Like everything is energy, okay? So if you're doing the work and if you are committed to your highest path, anything that vibrationally is not a match just gets removed because it's things that are then out of your control because the universe and all the laws attached to the universe enter they enter to like interfere to get you on this highest path. So everything got brought to light this year. People just decided to change jobs, move countries, the relationships weren't for them. You know, there was actually a real underbelly of bravery, I think, that came with this year too.
Yeah, that's actually a really great word, I think, and a lot of the people that are currently going through that, I hopefully they'll listen to this, will hear that in it because that's how I'm seeing them go through it is that it is bravery and resilience and this like it happened, moving on, like but not in a way that's like glossing over it, but rather like all right, like being asked to level up kind of thing here and what do I want to do now essentially and taking control of it instead of maybe previous behaviors of coping through things.
And here's the thing with that as well, you know, the main three reasons that people come to me as a sidekick, and I say it's the three C's. It's they want connection to something bigger than them, they're at a crossroads, and they want clarity. And that's the three things. And if you're able to really just pause and see those steps, those three steps, and how you can then take those steps, you know, connection comes through meditation. Just take a pause and connect there. And knowing that you're at a crossroads is actually the best place to start because you can go in any direction you want. So it feels scary, but it's like actually you've got a new pathway that's been presented to you. And then the clarity comes when you start to make aligned choices. So just make a choice, even if you're not sure, just do one single thing. And connecting to your intuition is the best way to know what's best for you. Because a lot of the times, like we do look outside of ourselves for guidance, and people do come to me for that. But during my sessions with clients, I'm like, what would you do? putting it back to them, because we always have the answers inside of us, right? We always know what's best. It's just remembering that power that we've got.
Yeah, I think what I've seen with the people that I've been working with, anyways, in regards to that, the not the connection piece, because they're connected enough to know that something's not good, right? Like they are like something's got to change, but then they do come to like the fork in the road, so to speak. And instead of there just being two paths, there's usually like infinite. Essentially, you could do anything. But I have found for people that that is the hardest, is that because you could do anything, they end up doing nothing. And so what would your advice be, or like how would you work with somebody through that? Like I know you said you put it back on them, but I think for a lot of people, if they've never had that trust in themselves, it can be really hard to know that they just want you to tell them what to do. So, yeah, what would your first step be to like if you don't know what to do and you have like a bunch of options, how would you start?
I do this really cool technique with my clients where we bring it all to the table. So it's a visualization technique where you close your eyes and you imagine the energy of all the projects or all the things you want to do laid out on a table. You just get really calm. And it, people think meditation is really complicated or it takes time. It doesn't. All you have to do is be in a quiet space, close your eyes, imagine the table in front of you, take a few deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth, and just have a play around with how certain things feel. So let's say, for example, somebody's got 10 projects, they haven't started any. Just go with them one by one. Actually visualize it coming off of a wall and onto the table in front of you. How does it feel? How does it evolve? Who's involved in this project? Does it feel right? If it feels good, keep it. If it doesn't, just put it back, and just one by one. And it's actually a really, really fun experiment because certain ideas come up, certain things people are like, oh my God, I just feel nothing towards that. I felt like I had to do that podcast, but actually that's going to take up too much time, or I'm just going to write a book instead. There's so many different things that come up, but that's your intuition talking to you and your highest self guiding what's best for not just you, but for everybody else connected to you. So I think if we always have this intention before we do that, that we're doing this for the highest good of all, for anyone that comes into our path or needs it, you really honestly can't go wrong. And I do think that that's the best place to start, and it's fun to see what
I
your
yeah.
intuition says.
I This is my season because like this is the time of year where everyone's like, let's visualize the future and do our vision boards. And I'm like, yes. Like I'm a futuristic person. Like I'm living in the future constantly, as one of my strengths. Futuristics in my top five. So it's up there. But I did that because I was like, everyone had been telling me like you should start a plus size clothing line. Like even our mutual friend Sue Bryce was like, have you ever thought about this? Because there's obviously a big need for it. And I was like, yeah, because I also have activator, which means I'm like, just because I can doesn't mean I should.
It's
But at first, the energy is there to be like, yeah, I'm going to change so much stuff with this because I can see the end, but I forget about everything that comes before the end. And so I did that because I was like, wait. Let me just like walk through the process of, okay, let's say you do this. You figure out how to have a clothing line, you connect, with the right people. And you know what made me like lose the joy of the whole thing was I was like, I don't want to handle returns. Like I don't want people to return their clothes. Or I don't want to mail stuff out. Like it was stupid shit like that. And I was like, nope, I think what I want is maybe to collaborate with somebody that's already got the systems in place and I just get to come in and design shit. Like,
fine tuning the idea, the
yeah,
creation, right? You're like almost putting it through a sieve over and over and over until you have that one grain that's like just amazing, like the best idea ever. And like there's no
yeah.
rush, right? You just have
But
to keep doing that.
yeah, and so after I did that, I was like, "Oh, that really works." To literally walk through and be like, "Okay, this isn't sparking joy or whatever." But I will say one of the things that's hard for people from the body image perspective is so many of us have lost trust with what our body is telling us, which is where your intuition is. And I always said, is it a coincidence that they taught us to hate our stomachs, which is where most of our intuition and like gut feelings come from? No, because then we would say no more often. We would not take on certain jobs. We would not be as people pleasy. But because of that, I find even getting people to walk through those visualizations, they still don't trust, even though they're like, it feels good, but like they'll always have a but, and they'll quickly push it away. And so for me, what I've done is I'm like, I just want you to entertain it. Like, just you're gonna want to push it away, but just hold on to it for a minute because it's so fast. So, how do you work with people through that aspect if they haven't maybe gotten to the place where they can trust what their body's telling them or like the feelings they're having?
Oh, I had full goosebumps as you were talking about that topic because it's so true. Like, even just with us not trusting it, I think there's a lot of judgment as well. You know, when you judge yourself or you take on the judgments of others, like that can actually block your intuition because that's connected to self-doubt as well. You know, so there's all these dynamics that go on in it. And I always come back to those feelings, thoughts, emotions. Like, is there any self-judgment? Are you holding on to any judgments from others that you can let go of? And then, you know, the doubt part as well. Where can you trust yourself more? So I think for me, I'm kind of at the beginning phase where I am unpicking these beliefs in people's minds. Because a lot of the work that I do is mental, which is connected to the physical, but everything really starts in our mind, right? So being able to understand where certain thoughts come from, where our beliefs come from, and a lot of the times it's from childhood or it's from some kind of trauma that we've experienced. And so by being able to make peace with that, accept it, and then transmute the energy, it allows you to be more in your body so that you can be at peace with your body because, you know, our body is our physical vessel for our soul to express itself through. So we have to love it. We chose it. We chose every single thing about who we are, even its imperfections.
Mm.
And you know, as women, you know, our bodies do they change. They change with the seasons, they change with our emotions, they change when we have children. There's so many different things that we experience as women. And I think that when you're able to connect to your own emotions, it helps you then to connect to your body as well.
Yeah, and for me, I found that I had to move through the body image bullshit to recognize like the way I always the visual I always get is like if I could just remove my body and just set it over here and say you're a biological organism, you're letting me live this life and do the thing, and then I am the sole person over here that has a bunch of stories that are made up about what this represents over here, right? And I'm like, but so you have to separate that first so you can work through all of this stuff here, the trauma, the pain, the shame, because that just represents all of this. And then once you do that, then that's when feeling does become safe because you're trusting what it's telling you. Because I think that's one of the things that happens. Most people socialized as women, or underrepresented humans, essentially, their bodies are from a young age are taught that they aren't safe, like that their body itself is not the safe vessel, because of the things that happen to it, right? Just in order to move forward for yeah, because the alternative to that is not great. So in order to survive, we're like, you're the problem, the body's the problem. And until we hit what, 35, and then or like into our when our brains fuse back together and we're like, wait, something's wrong. And then we can start to actually feel things again. But that's also where I find people get distracted a lot. I did. That's why I worked myself into burnout, was because I could not let myself feel because it was unsafe for me to feel things. But I had to move through the body stuff first to realize it wasn't my body's fault. And then I was in a space to do that. And the other thing was with feeling was I didn't feel safe to feel unless I had people that made it safe for me to feel things, if that made sense. Like my husband, and then I have a group of friends. They were the ones that witnessed me in these harder emotions, sadness, anger, frustration, the things I learned early on that were not good emotions to have.
Interesting, because one of the things that you also helped me do was we done a photo shoot when the last time you visited, and then you read my Clifton strengths, and we had this really beautiful energy exchange. But what I found so transformative about what you shared with me was I came from a background where when my photos were taken, they were highly airbrushed, they were put in magazines, and I didn't even recognize myself. So that was something I was always used to.
Mm.
And then I knew the kind of work that you did. I was really excited to get my photos taken by you. And then not, I had done the inner work, right? So I was comfortable with myself from the inside out. But then what you did with your art was you showed me from the outside in, and it was acceptance, right? So you show someone in their entirety, and it's about that acceptance. I do have wrinkles on my forehead and like laugh lines, and the crumples in your arms, and it's like it was like a reality check, honestly, and it made me feel more comfortable in my physical
Oh.
vessel, which is expansion, because that helps me then expand my consciousness, because it gives me an understanding of how other people may feel. Insecurities, self doubt, all of these things. So I'm honestly really grateful that you were able to share that with me, because yeah, it's powerful doing the inner work, but something that you're doing is you're doing it the other way as well, and you're showing acceptance from the outside in too, which is just amazing.
Yeah, it's like the witnessing aspect of it.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a big proponent of exposure therapy. So, like, it's like, hey, listen, it's there whether you like it or not. So you might as well look at it. It's just like feelings or intuition. Like if you're having these pulls to go somewhere, just entertain it for a minute. Like, just sit with it. You don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to change your life. You can just be with it for a minute and wait till all the noise dies down. We talked about that on the last podcast. I was like, because there's always a lot of noise, which is usually when we want to distract instead of sit with, right? Yeah, and so the fact that you were able to do that, I think, also probably is a testament to the work that you do, where you probably had the initial thoughts come up about the way you looked in those photographs, which, by the way, it was like a 2-minute photo shoot. This wasn't, we didn't even, it wasn't a full Terry experience. This was literally like, hey, we got some flowers and you look cool today. Come, let me take your photo.
It was
Um,
awesome.
but yeah, we were also just in a really cool the whole experience was cool with all the women being seen, and yeah, it was thanks to Sue for putting that together. That was a cool thing for us. But it's a testament also though to the work that you've done, the inner work in that way, because that's why I say body image isn't about bodies, it's about your mind. First of all, it's everything you think about your body that gets in the way more often than not. And so that's why you were able to see yourself the way I see you, I think. Um, Instead of like looking at the photos and have you might still have had that thought of like, oh, I see my, like you said, the body wrinkle or whatever, the lines in the forehead, the thing you always see when you look at it, but you didn't distract from it. You entertained it and kind of thought about it differently. But I think
Processing,
because
you
that's
know.
what you do that, I assume, if you want to talk us through kind of like your process with meditation and sitting still long enough or just being quiet long enough that that noise eventually subsides and then the other stuff can come through. So talk to me a little bit about that for you, because that was one of the things I struggle with, is sitting long enough to let the noise just calm down for a minute.
Some people actually fear, avoid, or distract themselves from meditation is because you don't know what thoughts are going to come up. And most of the time, we're trying to avoid certain thoughts. And when you're able to just allow all of that to come up to the surface, no matter what it is, and sometimes I will sit with a notepad and a pen in meditation, and I'll have all these annoyances or things to do that I've been trying to distract myself from, and I just write them out. And half of the stuff I don't even need to action. It's actually nothing to worry about or think about, but it clears your mind when you're able to get it out from and your mind's an energy field. You know, when you're able to clear it, it allows that space for your intuition and higher wisdom to then come in. And I think that that's why meditation as a daily practice is so important, because we do build up a certain amount of emotion, of thoughts, of energies around us day to day. So the way that you can clear it and reset every single morning or night is by allowing whatever thoughts that you've been thinking to just release themselves. But in hypnotherapy sessions with clients, I refer to our thoughts as, you know, just something to be observed.
Mm.
You don't always have to action a thought. So let the thought come up, and then just let it pass by. What we all have a tendency to do is let a thought come up, you hold on to it, and then imagine it like you then start to add meaning, and then you start to add this, and then before you know it, it's just got absolutely massive and it's too much.
Yeah.
So then you push it back down, and
Yeah.
then another one comes up, you know, and it's just this constant battle. It's like, you know, when thoughts come, let them go. If there's a thought that makes you feel good, go with the thought, visualize on it, dream on it, because everything is energy. Your mind is so powerful that what it believes will manifest. So if there's any kind of negativity or things to come up, even if you're fearful, you can then just acknowledge that, like, okay, I have this thought and I'm fearful, but I'm going to acknowledge that, okay, I'm fearful of this thought. I don't know how to change that. Help me,
Mm.
show me, teach me the way. There's a mantra that I say, and it changes the way that you approach life, and it changes the way that the universe responds to you too. Synchronicities happen every time I say this, and it's show me the path, I will walk it, give me the signs, make them crystal clear. If you meditate and say that every day, like, the most incredible things will start to unfold.
I think that's so amazing, and that's something really tangible and relatively easy for people to, like, hang on to, because I think that's the other part, like I said, when people are usually presented with all the options, it's just easier to not do any of the options, and same thing with, like, meditation, so the thought of not going into it with anything, like, just what, you want me just to sit there? Like, it's too big for people to do. But if you can go into it and saying, like, here's the mantra I'm going to start with, it kind of funnels it in a little bit for your brain to like find what it needs to find, what it's actually been trying to look for the whole time, right? Which I think is a really cool way to do that. I'm definitely going to put that into practice. One of the things that I have also found for me, like, I know a lot of people, everyone meditates differently or things like that, but for me, places of water, like the shower for sure, so many ideas always come through. So now when my emotions are too big, or when the noise is too loud, I will go and have a shower, and not to shower, literally just to stand in the water and like visualize the thoughts actually going down the drain. And then that clears for, I say it's like higher me talking to younger me can come through and like do a little bit of parenting action in there, because the noise, we acknowledged it, but then we let it go down the drain. Like, it allows me to see it, which is really helpful. But like recognizing what environments again make you feel safe to be able to do that, I think is also a key ingredient. Would you agree?
Huge. Environment's everything. You know, if you're in a chaotic environment, there's a lot of people around, there's a lot of distractions. It's very difficult to be able to connect with your own energy field, your own feelings, how it feels in your body, what your thought processes are. Because naturally, what we're all doing is we have these antennas that are connected to everything and everyone around us. And more people are becoming more sensitive to what that feels like for them. So I think having an environment where it's quiet, where there's nobody else that you're kind of picking up on their energy. And like you mentioned, water is very cleansing. It's very intentional as well. You know, the process of clearing your energy field and through that physical action is it's yeah, a lot of people can do that.
Yeah.
Even when I teach in my clients, when I teach them how to read other people, a quick way to ground in between clients or even just day to day if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed is rinsing your hands under the cold water and then just imagining that any energy that's not yours is just being rinsed off of your body. It's a really nice way to do it.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, because that was gonna be my next thing was like, when I do conferences or workshops or things like that, I love to like just like take all the energy and give all the energy. Like it's depleting for sure, but it's fulfilling at the same time. Like that is my gift. But I had to realize if I did not take the time to let go of other people's energy, whether through movement, that was the other thing I started doing when I did photo shoots. I started doing self portraits after my client left, even if I was exhausted. And it was just dancing, like literally, but I would imagine their energy leaving and then I could have a nap. You know what I mean? But prior to that, I didn't. And what would happen is I would sit at my desk and like all the energy would just like fuse into my bones. And I'm pretty sure that was a huge thing that contributed to my burnout happening so quickly was I just never I gave out everything I had and I took on all the crap of other people and I didn't do anything with their stuff, essentially.
And it's really simple things that we neglect, such as meditation in the morning or before we go to bed, and moving our bodies, being able to connect with ourselves, how we feel, just having that balance, the inner balance, before we start to go out into the outside world and the needs and wants of everybody else, right? So yeah, energy protection is really important. And you know, I think sometimes with energy protection there could be like a negative element to it, but it's not. It's just you energetically saying these are my boundaries,
Mm.
and you don't even have to verbally express them to anyone. There's just some kind of supernatural, metaphysical thing that happens when you establish your own inner boundaries and you say, I mean, you can just ask the universe, protect my energy, and it will be done. A lot of people like to take crystals with them. So any grounding crystals like tourmaline, tiger's eye, that kind of thing. If you're someone who likes the physical ritual, having things like that on you, grounding. So there has been scientific studies to show that grounding your feet in the earth actually does reduce inflammation. It reduces stress. It helps you incredibly clear your mind. So even if you can just do these small things are never ever small. They are monumental in the grand scheme of energy exchange, and the busy lives that we are living. This is the world that we live in. And it is manageable as long as you're mindful of what you need and setting these energetic boundaries.
Well, and I think that is a great segue to the three things that you like to teach people, which is, I think the order of it is what? The knock, the nudge, the rhino? Or is it backwards? Did I do it?
Nudge, not rhino,
Oh,
that's it.
nudge now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing was for me when before I realized that I had to let go of other people, like protect my energy, I would just take it in. But what happened was I experienced what I would consider to be the knock because it was a really loud voice in my head, call it my higher self, like my spirit guides, whatever. But because I had not been like taking care of myself because I was people pleasing and taking care of all my clients, making sure like I never took time for myself. I heard such a loud, clear voice in my head that said, "You need to move your body now." And it was like the only other time I had heard that voice was when I was 7 years old and I was about to cross the street and I just heard stop and a car ran through a stop sign. And so it was the same voice. So I don't know who it is, but thank you to whoever you are. But because it was that same voice and I listened to it then and I heard it this time, I listened to it and I was like, it doesn't matter how hard it is, just go outside. You don't have to set a time limit, don't set a distance, just start moving your body again. And it was that made me have to be intentional. And then once I started doing it, then I was like, okay, if I can do that one little thing, like that's how impactful that knock was for me, because it was not going to be pretty, I don't think, if I had not listened.
It's interesting because we all experience these signs, right? You're getting these signs, but most of the time we don't know how to interpret what the signs are, or we get told that signs aren't real, but they are. And what I have found is there's these three elements to it. You had the knocks, which was like this. I would describe that as a nudge, right? So the
Mm.
nudge is the inner voice, that voice you can't explain, but it comes from somewhere and it's telling you to make a certain choice.
Yeah.
But if you ignore the nudge, which is
Mm.
your inner dialogue, you got a knock, which is an external
Ah,
situation, right? So something external will like give you that knock, like, hey, get outside, or in your instance, maybe you would have came down with a cold, or something would have happened where you can't go walk or you can't go outside, and then you think, well, I really should have done that. I wish I could have done that.
yeah,
I'm going
hindsight.
to go do that. It like kicks you up the butt.
Yeah.
So these knocks are the secondary thing that happens to get you on the right track. And if you ignore both, then we get the rhino. And that's the universe's way of moving us regardless, because the universe is always working for our highest good all of the time. So sometimes when things are a bit turbulent, or you get, it's not for all instances, of course, but certainly when we don't take responsibility for our own paths and lives, and whatever it may be, the universe will guide us and nudge us and rhino us if it's necessary, you
Mm.
know.
Yeah, well, as soon as you had taught me those things, I was like, yep, I will be listening. Because it's just so
Nudges.
easy. It's just easy not to until it knocks you on your ass, or worse. It like totally just like flips the table and your whole life. And I always said, like, I would rather choose to change than be forced to change. So like, call that control issues if you will. I don't care. But I also like to change. I was telling my friend this the other day. Who's the complete opposite of me. I'm like, if you're not changing, you're growing. And she's like, we could not be more different. I do not agree with that. I do not like that. But but I think it's like, again, one of those things, being like hearing it, hearing your inner voice. It's always talking to you, even though some people say they don't have an inner voice, but you have an inner knowing. I think that's the difference, right? I have a
Different
huge
ways,
dialogue
yeah.
in my head all the time, but like it's a knowing more than.
Yeah. All of us have a sixth sense and we're born with it. We just don't get taught how to develop it. And that's the main thing that I teach, is how to develop your intuition. And so some people do hear voices, and it sounds like your higher self.
Okay.
Some people just have this knowing. They can't explain it, but they know that they're being pulled in a specific direction and they take action based on that. Some people are very visual, so some people actually have dreams and they have visions, or some people are clairvoyant and they can actually sense messages coming through from people who have passed away. Some people get very physical signs from the universe, like song lyrics. They might find feathers, and certain animals speak to them in specific ways. So some people really like tangible signs. And it just depends how you can interpret it. I mean, one of the number one ways to feel into something that's right for you is through your gut. People always say, trust your head or your heart. Where do you feel it, head or heart? And I'm like, neither. Always trust your gut.
Mhm.
We don't get taught that. And you will actually feel it in your stomach, because that's where your solar plexus
Mhm.
energy center is. It's you. That's your sense of self. It's who you truly are and your authenticity. And if you're ever stuck and you don't know what to do, and you're getting these nudges no matter what's going on, just sit with it and just ask the question innerly, is this right for me? and just see what sensation you get in your stomach. It's fascinating. Sometimes it's warm, sometimes it's fuzzy, and you're like, oh, actually, that makes me feel good. Sometimes it might make you feel ill, and you're like, oh, that's your intuition talking to you. It's so subtle, but we just get taught like if it's not written down in black and white, oh, I can't trust it. You know,
Well,
if it's
yeah,
not something,
if it doesn't make sense logically, I
yeah,
think that's the thing, right? I remember I as a people pleaser always say yes to everything. Every unscarcity thinking has been huge, not so much now, but before. So I'd say yes to every opportunity. And one time I was on a flight, it was like a 3 hour flight, and I had accidentally left my headphones, my phone, and my books all up in the top. So I had 3 hours just to sit on the plane. And as I was sitting there, this thing that I had agreed to do, I for some reason it just popped. Well, there, the universe was showing me like what I needed to deal with. But this thing that I agreed to wasn't happening for another 6 months or something like that. But for some reason that came up, and the pit in my stomach, it was like it was that visceral, almost like, yeah, squidgy. That's where that word comes from. Squidge comes from. It was so squidgy though. Like, but I had 3 hours to sit in it, and I was like, I think I have to say no, even though I've already said yes. And for somebody that's a people pleaser to like take back what they've already agreed to, or like an achiever to say no to something. But I was like, no. And I consulted with some people because I still needed, I'm like, am I crazy? Because at that point, I was not ready to trust myself that I knew what was right for me. But I did. I did say no. And guess what? Nothing happened. I survived. So, you know what I mean? But at first it was so visceral in my gut because I had no distractions. Like again, a lot of the thoughts I get, really good stuff comes to me when I'm in an airplane. Higher to heaven, I guess. But
right.
but because of that, I was like, oh, my body is talking to me. Like I am the one that's not listening all the time. So now that that was so loud, I get it wasn't a sound, but it was a feeling. Now when that happens, I'm very aware because of that situation that I did the hard thing. And that's kind of what I would like to get a little guidance from you for how you maybe help people through that, because it's one thing to know you need to make a change. It's another to actually take the step to do it. Because it's just easier to do what you've always done. So, how do you encourage people to like hold on to the trust when there is maybe no logical reason why they should do that thing?
That's the thing with the unknown. It's very uncomfortable. So it's practices where you're very comfortable being uncomfortable. So some of my clients, I get them to do ice showers. So we have like not for everyone, but for certain clients, I'm like, you're going to be in a very uncomfortable unknown for a few months whilst you transition this life change. So enjoy it. You know, every morning, get up, go walk 20 minutes, meditate, you know, have these things that you do. And then they start to become normal. The cold showers, ice plunges, cold baths, that's such an uncomfortable thing, but your mind begins to slow down when you're embracing the uncomfortability. For people who don't want to be as extreme as that, I would say meditation. Just keep on going back into the practice, asking the question again, asking the question again, and just seeing what signs show up for you, seeing how you feel, seeing how the universe responds to you, because it is always talking to you. And I say your intuition is genuinely like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. And I do see why it can be very scary initially, because we have been conditioned to trust everything outside of ourselves. And so it is a process of unlearning. And, you know, I go through past patterns, belief systems, how we can release the past. Forgiveness is a huge thing too. Being able to forgive yourself, being able to forgive others. So it's definitely a process, and it's not an overnight thing. Like you're just going to wake up and, you know, trust your intuition and know what choices to make. It can take some time. But knowing that there is a time period where you are going to be in that transition and all of it's learning and all of it's good, I think it's the first step to take in control over your life and being able to have that sense of responsibility. Because honestly, the most powerful thing we have in this life is choice.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that you can make good choices for yourself is like it's the most liberating thing.
Yeah,
So
I think for a lot of people, at least like a lot of people that I've talked to and experienced myself for a while, was not, but it was easier for me to think that I didn't have choice. It was safer for me to think that somebody else is responsible for me to do this, which like keeps you stuck and small and all this stuff, but it's still safe because that's what you've always done. Right? So how do you, and maybe you don't even do this, but how do you get people to, aside from meditation, maybe, how do you get people to expand their, what's the word, like their nervous system to be able to handle like these changes happening? Like, I don't know if you have any practices for that, but that's something that's I always think about is like, how can we expand our nervous systems to be ready for us to do that thing?
a lot of the people that I teach are intuitives. I do teach a lot of people who are healers, Reiki masters, psychics, intuitives, psychologists, psychiatrists, people in law, even. And I teach them in a way that any experience that you have, no matter how weird it is, talk about it,
Mm.
because validation of your weirdness is the first way to expand your vessel and your consciousness to be able to accept more. And you
Wait,
start.
wait. That was a good one. I will make sure to go back and make that a quotable because that was so good. Yes. Okay. Validation of your weirdness. That's all we need to know.
As well, validation of your weirdness is the number one way to expand your consciousness, because you can then see yourself in another person, and something inside your intuitive field recognizes it, and it's the safety thing that we talk about. You then feel safe to explore what that might be,
Mm.
so I have a community where we once a month we have a call, and it's honestly, I need to start recording them and putting them on a podcast, because the conversations that we have, the last time I was on a call, I had a psychologist, I had a healer, and then this other girl, she actually looks after young kids in like adoption homes,
Yeah.
but she does energy work with the kids, and she helps them to, because some of them are autistic, so she's really helping them to communicate. And we were having this conversation, and we were just talking about metaphysical experiences we'd had, supernatural synchronicities. But it's completely normal when you are of that understanding that we're helping each other here, and we're validating what other may deem to be like weird. It's not
Yeah.
weird. Um, yeah, I mean, the client that I have who runs the children's homes, she says, sometimes she had one. She said one of her children, they'd had a really bad day and they were acting completely up character, and then they had texted her after and said, "I'm really sorry, miss. It was the moon." And she's like, you can't just blame everything on the moon. But when she came in the next day, she said, "Can you tell me about the moon? Can you tell me why you think that?" And she said they just had the most incredible like conversation, you know. She said sometimes they just tell them to just like lie down, like, "I'm just going to lie down, I'm just going to ground myself." So yeah, there's all these different methods that people use. Then my other client was saying, "Have you ever tried Reiki? Have you tried energy healing? Have you tried?" And we kind of just talk back and forth to put different ideas out there, because I do actually think that there's ways in which we can evolve certain systems through energy work. We can improve certain systems through compassion, understanding, validation. Logic and technology is so necessary, and it's incredible. It does help us to evolve, but being able to incorporate intuition into all these practices and industries is how we're actually going to be able to expand our consciousness on a global level.
Well, yeah, and I just think about even like in my business, all of the things that have the biggest impact, which is what I believe I'm here to do, is have like this maximum impact on people to get closer to their authentic selves. Is every time I did something that made no logical sense. It wasn't to make money. It was like it wasn't for the business. It wasn't for this. It was because I had an idea. My intuition was like, this could be cool. Let's go explore what that could be like. And to anybody else, it looked weird. But I was like, let's just see what happens. Like that's where I kind of approach, and I've always done this as a kid, more like a scientist, where I'm like, let's just see what happens. No, like we don't know what's gonna come out the other side of this. And every time I follow that line of thinking or that intuitive pull, that is when I found the most success. Is when I have done the weird thing that made no logical sense at all. So I'm like, why would I stop now? But
Like,
it is the like the validating of that weirdness to say like you might not be able to explain why it is the way that it is, but you were curious enough to investigate it. And that's like here's a reward for that.
it totally rewards your action, and that's why like your intuition's like a muscle. The more you just exercise that, the stronger it's going to become. You're like, yeah, I remember when I did that like 100 times before. I got always rewarded for it, so I'm good. Like I know how this thing works. Like
Yeah, and in psychology, that's one of the questions that you ask yourself when you feel stuck or whatever. Is like, how in the past have I faced something difficult before and how did I move through it then? And so it's literally the same thing, but like thinking more from an intuitive space of how your intuition helped you move through. And I think as far as the world is concerned, you're right. Like to move forward, it has been very logical, like heavy-handedly logical for too long, that we need to balance it out with the intuitive woo-wooiness of the world because but I mean it makes sense why they push that away because that is mostly associated with the feminine. Even though that doesn't mean men can't be intuitive. That's not what I'm saying. You know that. Okay.
energy,
Uh,
it's different
Energy.
polarities
Yeah.
of energy. You know, the masculine and feminine. And actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that because you know this is the one way that we all come together to embrace our unique gifts is not having that division between you know masculine, feminine. This is your job. This is your role. This is no. Actually, we all have masculine and feminine energies within us, and it's about embracing the intuitive aspect, the nurturing aspect, especially moving into this next year, we are seeing a shift in consciousness, a shift in energy, where if intuition leads, which is the feminine, and then the masculine energy comes in behind that to push it, we'll actually get so far ahead of ourselves. And that's what's required. Otherwise, you know, we're just going to be, you can't stay stuck in the same cycle and expect different results.
Well, exactly. It's just you just like what I did, where I just kept working to work, like thinking if I just keep working harder, then it won't be so hard. That's not how that works. It's like, no, you need to rest as much as you work. Like that's it has to have both in order for it to move, in order for you to move forward. So yeah, that's amazing. So tell everyone, you mentioned that you teach people. So yeah, you work with intuitives, other creative thinkers and things like that. So tell us a little bit about that aspect of the teaching stuff.
I do a soul reading diploma where I teach intuitives or really anyone who wants to explore their abilities because we all have this intuitive ability within us. And this course that I run once a month, it's mainly for someone who wants to start a business. You know, you have a calling that's weird and you don't know what to do with it. Then I basically teach you everything you need to know about embracing that weirdness, how to interpret signs, how to interpret different energies, how to read energy, how to protect and balance your own energy. You know, there are specifics to being able to take on the responsibility of being a spiritual entrepreneur, right?
Mhm.
So this is a course that I run once a month. It's the Soul Reading Diploma, and I am registered with a worldwide organisation that provides certificates at the end of the course for everyone as well. And I think that's good to have that the groundedness in it. It is a skill. You have taken time to understand yourself and others. So I think this is really what we're moving into now is the new age of energy healing, of really harnessing the power of our minds, because our mind is so powerful. So that is what I teach people. I teach people how to guide others into that next phase of life. And I also have my coaching programs too, the one-to-one readings that I do. And what I do is I blend my own skill set that I have, which is a qualification in hypnotherapy, NLP, CBT. I actually got qualified in that before I knew I was psychic, before I had any of my spiritual awakening. I was like, okay, I'm in this corporate job. Let me learn all this stuff about the human mind. And yeah, it took a year for me to qualify in that. But during that time, I had a spiritual awakening, and I'm like, wow, we're pretty cool as humans. Let me just see how all this blends together. And much like yourself, I had that idea that I'm just going to read for people.
Yeah.
And it was so far away from my corporate job. I'm like, okay, I'm going to read for people. That's crazy, but let's do it. And I was booked ever since.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I blend both of that together. If there is certain traumas or certain things to be released, we can do hypnotherapy, we can look at phobias. There are steps and processes to take that can unstick you from where you are and help you develop this mindset where you truly know, it's not even a belief, you know that anything is possible in this life. And for you to understand your purpose, which is really the main element of my coaching, is what is your soul here to learn in this lifetime? And how do you use your life lessons to then use that as a blueprint to guide other people? Because what we find is where our hardships have been and what our toughest life lessons are is actually what we are here to guide other people to do. So an example of that was, for me, I've lived like 2 or 3 lifetimes in this life. Um, I was on a TV show when I was younger. I lived the celebrity life. I went from there into corporate. I was in a very corporate job, very like materialistic led, it was just hitting targets, and I'd done really well, but none of that was my purpose. None of it fulfilled me. I learned a lot of lessons from it, which then gave me the life experience to embrace who I am now. And my toughest lesson was embracing the fact that I was psychic. I couldn't tell anyone. I suppressed it. I kept it to myself, but that was my purpose, was to embrace my authenticity to the point where I can say, I am weird. And as soon as we all start talking about it, my people will come to me, just like your people will come to you.
Yeah.
We all have these purposes, sometimes multiple, sometimes one main part of our soul contract that we're here to achieve. And that's what I guide people to find, is what were the lessons, what's your purpose, and how do you actually walk the path? And that's the greatest gift that we can ever give to ourselves and other people in this lifetime.
Yeah, I will say Carly did a reading for me. That was like when I had done Clifton Strengths for her, and then she did a reading for me, and it was so awesome. And it was funny because we were on the last podcast we recorded, we talked about it a little bit. She does, as soon as it's out of her mouth, she doesn't know what she tells people. So I was like, oh yeah, it was so true. And she's like, I don't even know what I told you. But that makes sense, like that, because you're a conduit to basically be like, here's the news, and then like you're obviously not gonna. Can you imagine if you held on to everybody's shit in your head? No, that'd be way too much.
There was like something that was written that you're avoiding, or there was something.
Yeah, the one I brought up was the because she draws little pictures of what she sees, a look kind of. But essentially it was like my little body, and then she's like, it's like you've been given information, but it's going around you. It's like you're not receiving it. And it was in regards to, we were talking about health stuff, and my naturopath essentially was like, you probably should not eat, certain types of cheeses, you should not eat these things. And I'm like, yeah, yeah. And you were like, you might want to listen. You're like, I don't know what you've done, but you've created this barrier that the information's just not going through to you. You won't let the information in.
Full story, bro, but I'm eating the cheese. Like, and I see it, I'm like, no, 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 it's not going to work.
Yeah, so ever since then though, every time I go to have the cheese, I literally picture the stupid drawing you had. I'm like, "Oh no, I'm ignoring the advice again. I don't want it to be not. I don't want to wait for the knock to happen." So,
It's all good. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, that was one of my favorite parts. But
I
then
loved it.
also you ended up doing a big chunk of my reading was actually about my brother, which I was like, "Of course." But it actually helped him, by the way. So, immensely. So,
Fascinating because whatever comes up in a reading is always absolutely necessary for not just you, but everyone connected to you.
yeah.
So I never really know what's going to come up in a reading. And I do tell people that, look, I don't know what's going to come through, but we'll connect all the dots. And it's only ever what's necessary because there's a respect thing that happens in that spiritual realm. You know, they respect our time and then we respect theirs. And it's just being able to give as much as you can in that time frame. And I love that your brother came up and then it extends to like people that you care about and then they change their lives. And it's, you just don't know what kind of ripple effect that we can have on other people just by our words, right?
Yeah, which is so awesome. And I think when we were talking about last time, we kind of chatted about the fear that comes up with that. So this part will be for anybody that's maybe also feeling heavily intuitive, but doesn't know what to do with the signs that they're getting, or maybe you're too shy to tell the person, or you're afraid of saying the wrong thing. I think that's something that comes up a lot because it's weird to be like, I like see a random person and you're like, all of a sudden you just have this urge that you can't help, but you have to say something to them or go talk to them, whatever. But like so many of us will just be like, oh no, that's stupid or that's silly. That's where we push it away. So how did you work through that for yourself to be able to just be like this, listen, I'm just here to deliver the message, you do with it what you will.
A process. So you will go through that phase where you could be walking down a street and you'll see imprints of people. And you just feel like you know everything about that person, good, bad, whatever it might be. And whatever hit you get, know that it's true. You don't always have to express it, but if you get the sense from someone, know that that's right. Also, when you are being guided to give a message to someone else, it will feel like you know, when you put loads of marshmallows in your mouth and you just like need to spit them out. Your literal words will feel like that. You have to tell the person. Um, One of the modules in the course that I teach, it's about being able to language the interpretations that you get, because sometimes there can be really sensitive information that comes through. Um, an example of that was I'd done a reading for a client, a gentleman, really successful guy, and the main focus of the reading was about him being focused on his health, on his mental health, on getting his routines back, on connecting with old friends. It was like he'd kind of isolated himself. And throughout the reading, I kept having this vision that his wife was having an affair. And, you know, something like that's quite heavy. And that's not something that you want to just, like, I would
Blurt
never
out.
just say, because that's actually not for his highest good. Yeah, that's something that's coming up and it's something to be addressed, but there is a part where you need to allow the client to express that that's a concern of theirs, right? Because they may have their own life lessons that they have to learn. There might be certain things that has to unfold. So I did ask him, I said, look, is there anything else that you would like clarity on? And he said, you know, I have a feeling that my wife is having an affair. And I said, well, there's a way in which you can trust your intuition and be guided to what feels right for you. And I told him to meditate, and you say a mantra, you say, you know, something doesn't feel right. Please guide me to what's the highest good for all. And then 2 days later, he came back and he said, I found cinema tickets in my wife's pocket. She told me she was at a friend, she was out of town. We had a conversation. She admitted it, and then they parted ways. And that's why there's such a process when you're embracing your intuitive gifts, because there is a responsibility that comes with certain information. But You will only be given that kind of level of information when the the universe knows that you're able to language it and deliver it in such a way. So that's an experience that I have had personally, but I had been reading for many years before that happened. And for anyone who's new to this, just know that you don't always have to deliver the message. Sometimes it's just for you to know and then see how things unfold.
I
And
do.
then it gives you proof of life, you know?
Yeah. So one of the things like this, whenever I've been a conduit, I'll say where I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this, or I don't know why I'm saying this. Like that's usually, but like I almost can't do it without crying. Like it literally makes me cry every time I go to do the thing that isn't for me but for the other person. Um, how do you manage that? Because it's so like that makes it even more awkward than if it's just like,
The way in which to do it, when you have that feeling that you're going to have a message for someone, internally say, I understand I am reading so and so's energy. Allow me access to their energy field, but do not allow them access to mine.
mm,
Because you're reading them and it's important that you give them a message, but what you're actually getting is the feedback, energetic feedback. So it's two parts. One, tears is truth. So you're feeling that emotion like I'm giving someone the truth and this is amazing. But then you're also getting their energetic feedback of receiving the truth. So when you put up that energetic barrier, you're able to give it, but not get any like feedback from it, which is really important. And that's for anyone who's going to read someone or do any kind of energy work. That's one thing to always know is just to ask the universe, your guides, whoever, allow me access to their energy field with their permission, but do not allow them access to mine. And it just helps you to establish clarity. It gives clarity on you're there to deliver that message, and then that's it. You're out.
yeah, yeah, because before this was more so in my like young or in my 20s or whatever, there was an instance I just remember it so clearly. My grandpa had passed away just like, I don't know, a little while, like 3 months earlier or whatever. And I was taking my grandma out to dinner or for lunch at this restaurant. And all of a sudden it just came through. There's a table of ladies there. And it was like, my grandpa was like, you're to pay for everybody's meal at that table, all those women at the table. And like I could like even now it like makes me want to cry because like as I told them, I'm like, I'm gonna pay for your meals. I don't know why. I think it's her husband. He wants to do this. But like it was it's overwhelming. That's what it is. Like the way it feels is like the same way I feel when people sing the national anthem together. It's like that overwhelming, like I can't. I when I go to rallies or protests and everyone's chanting, I can't do it because I just start to cry because everyone's doing it at the same time. It's a lot of
Like
everyone's
love
energy.
as well. It's like you're almost ahead of time. So when you're reading someone, you're outside of the normal time space constraints, right? So you're almost seeing what their emotional response is to your message. So you're feeling it all at once. It's same protest. You're feeling everybody else's
Yeah.
higher emotions, right? So it makes sense.
Yeah, but every time I'm like, oh. And it's just like my voice cracks and I'm like, ah, fuck it, I can't.
It's
Awesome.
not me, it's them.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, guys. But I
Yes.
think, but you know, because we never talked about this last time, but I did mention it to you when you were doing my reading that I felt disconnected from that intuition that I used to have like that. But I think that's a big part of it is because I had, for a long time after my dad passed away, I never liked to cry. And so if that's how I would feel every time I would let myself be intuitive that way, I could see why I'd want to shut that down because it's scary.
Crossroads where it feels scary. And then we have a choice. So we always have a choice whether to lean into that unknown and embrace our gifts more. And that's where the validation of your weirdness comes in.
Mm.
Or it's like, oh, you shut it down. You know, I had a friend who was very intuitive, actually more intuitive than me at the time. And she was a fantastic clairvoyant, but she also had a very intense job within the police force. And so she just said, this is too much. I can't do it. And she chose the path of her career. And then she ended up becoming a mother, and she loves her life, but the path of being a clairvoyant, it just wasn't for her. And we all have choices to do it, but you can have both.
Yeah.
You can absolutely have your career, have your family, have everything, and also embrace these intuitive gifts without having to be fearful of them. Because if you have that gift and you have that ability, which we all do, why wouldn't we share that with the world? Because we're all having compassion for each other and helping each other to our highest good. I mean, even the client whose wife was having an affair, that's a life lesson that they both have had to share. They both had some kind of karma to work out. They figured it out, and now they're both on higher paths, So even sometimes perceived negative experiences can often have a profound meaning behind them, and we're all helping each other to get to that end result, in the most peaceful way, I guess.
Beautiful. Oh, amazing. All right. I could talk to you forever, so we won't do that though. But we'll save it for the next time. But where can people find out more? You mentioned there's like you run a monthly group or things like that. Is that something people can join? Where can people find out more about this stuff?
My website is thepsychiccoach.com, and it's the psychic coach, just one C in the middle. I love Instagram. I use Instagram all the time. I share loads of stuff on there. So follow me on Instagram at the psychic coach. I also have a broadcast group there called the Psychic Circle. So you get VIP access to all the courses that are coming out, any openings for one-to-one readings, all of that good stuff. And yeah, my soul reading diploma is once a month. And if you want to start a spiritual business, or embrace your intuitive gifts, you'll get everything you need from that course. And the next one is in January too. So all my dates are available on Instagram. And yeah, I just want to connect with as many people as possible so that they can really embrace their authenticity and share it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I'm sure we'll have you back on again in the future.
It's so good. Thank you for having me on.